I've not been able to keep up with the editing and releasing of the episodes. Things are moving too quickly. I've come to Arkham, to Miskatonic University with our old friend Dr. Armitage and new friend Dr. Rice. In my research, finding out what happened to Maria Carter, I found her granddaughter, who knows nothing of her family or why the law firm Kerwin, Olney and Marsh are looking for her. It also turns out that Kerwin, Olney and Marsh seem to be trying to get their hands on the Necronomicon. Dr. Rice and Dr. Armitage were looking into strange activities in the farmlands around Dunwich just outside of Arkham, and suspected that a man called Wilbur Whateley was involved, but he, having made an attempt to steal the Necronomicon, appears to have died in weird circumstances. Dr. Rice was able to give me a journal that belonged to her grandmother, Maria Carter, which might shed light on the whole situation. I've gone through this journal, and now we can hear from her own words everything that happened leading up to her death. And then I believe that me, Armitage and Rice will be onto something. Something bigger and more dangerous than last time. And honestly, I have no idea what's coming now.
August 1933. I saw Thomas again today. I cannot tell how much I love him. He is so kind and sweet. He has asked me to speak to his servants at Dunwich House regarding my needs in the household after we are wed. I told him that he knows I have simple needs, a few items of furniture that he may not already have and such. He still insists that I can indulge myself, and that the fortune will not be dwindled by anything that either of us could wish for. I'd like to believe that, but I also know that money comes and goes, and I don't even really know where his fortune stems from. This aside, I have put together a list of things, some trinkets, a box or two for the many gifts of jewellery that Thomas has made me over the years. 30th of August, 1933. I asked Thomas if I could see the bedroom, perhaps to add my own touches of decoration and suggestions, but he insisted that I shall not see it until we are husband and wife. I have no idea why he would want such a thing. He has never struck me as superstitious. And besides, what superstition would this be? The wedding plans are progressing, though I have little to contribute. As a girl, I never imagined my wedding. That was what other people did. And Thomas has been so wonderful planning everything and knows what my tastes are. My friends tell me I am very lucky, but it has the effect of making me feel quite redundant in my own life. 9th of September, 1933. I saw Mr. Harker today. It was so wonderful when Thomas allowed my old friend Mr. Harker to make my wedding ring. He wanted to do a final fitting to make sure it was perfect. He always was a perfectionist. I suppose it makes him the exquisite jeweller that he is today. I do hope it lives up to Thomas's expectations. It certainly exceeds my own. 10th of September, 1933. I went to Dunwich House today to speak with Thomas, mostly about the ring I saw yesterday. He didn't expect me to come, and so luck did not shine down on me that day as he was not home. The servants told me that they would let him know on his return that I had called, but they could not tell me where he had gone. I thought it somewhat strange. I could not tell if they merely did not know, or if they had been specifically told not to inform me of his whereabouts should I come inquiring as I had. Perhaps I read too much into this. It could be something to do with the wedding, some big surprise for me that they do not wish to mar. If that were it, I would not be surprised. Thomas is that wonderful. But there was something in their eyes that haunts me as I recount the events for my journal. Was it fear? But of what? Surely not me. Surely not Thomas. But then what? My imagination is running wild again. Always had an active imagination, my mother always said, and here it is again, proving her right. 23rd of September, 1933. It is now less than 2 months to our wedding day. Thomas has been doting on me again, finery I could hardly imagine myself ever needing. He has spoken of our honeymoon. Such a strange concept. I had heard of such things, but never thought I would venture upon one myself. I have hardly ever left London, and he is speaking of a voyage across the ocean to America. I am looking forward to it, almost as much as the wedding itself, though Thomas asked me such a strange question yesterday whilst we ventured along the boulevard. He asked why I wore the crucifix around my neck. I hardly knew what to say or how to answer. He dismissed it in a moment, but the question lingered in my mind as peculiar. 1st of October, 1933. I listened attentively to Father Bryce during his sermon this morning. He seemed to speak directly to me of faith, strength, and belief being all anyone needs to survive. I thought it odd. He is a strange pastor, to be sure. I hope I speak not in blasphemous manners, but he is the most unreligious religious man with whom I have ever had the pleasure of conversation. He too looks forward to the wedding, as it will be he who provides the service. He speaks that belief in oneself is paramount to allow for the belief in anything else, including the Lord Almighty. I am no philosopher nor theologian, but I sense this to be radical in this day and age. How he must be held in such contempt with his bishop. I wonder how he keeps his position here. Thomas thinks little of such things, of course. He has only spoken to Father Bryce on matters related to the wedding. It makes more sense as to the question about what he calls my burden, the crucifix upon my breast. 14th October, 1933. I grew nervous for the first time in my plans to marry Thomas. He is wonderful, but so aloof now. Perhaps he always was, and I was too blindsided by my feelings. That is what others say, but I know myself, and I believe he is far more distant now than he ever was. Perhaps, like me, he is feeling the commitment we are to make in 4 weeks' time, or the burden of planning has caught up with him and manifested now in his new aloof behaviour. Temporary only, I'm sure. 29th of October, 1933. I told Thomas today that I kept this journal. He seemed disgruntled, and it took me a long while before I could pluck up the courage to ask if it bothered him. Thomas said that he doesn't like me to exhaust myself on such nonsense as the upkeep of a journal. I have never noticed being exhausted from merely writing my thoughts down, but Thomas believes that it must impact upon my sensibilities. I don't know what that means. I have told Thomas that I will make less time for my journal. He was placated somewhat by this, but I could tell that he was still perturbed. I believe I shall tell him I have stopped, and will no doubt find solitude and time upon my own to continue. I wish I did not have to keep this from him, but perhaps his opinion will change when he sees the benefit it gives me. 8th of November, 1933. I haven't seen Thomas for several days. His staff tell me that he is away on business, and it dawned on me that I know nothing of his business. He never wishes to speak of work, and never shares his position in it. All I know of his position in society is that he came to the fortune that he has through inheritance. I had always assumed from his parents. However, looking back on our conversations, I don't even know that for sure. He also never speaks of his family. It is 9 days to the wedding, and I feel that I may know nothing about Thomas that really matters. I have started to have a few second thoughts about the wedding, but I cannot back out now. As little as I know about him, I do love him. 16th of November, 1933. Tomorrow is the day. Tomorrow I leave Maria Barlow and become Maria Carter. I am looking forward to it, but I cannot help but feel I am making a mistake. I am told this is normal fear and anxiety. I'm sure Thomas would tell me I am anxious because I am writing too much in my journal, but we haven't mentioned it since the last time. Perhaps I too am anxious about the trip afterwards, to America. 24th of November, 1933. I am writing from a hotel in Aylesbury, in America. The wedding went wonderfully, and I was very happy with the day. A few of Thomas's associates were in attendance. I mention this only as on the 18th we left for Aylesbury, arriving yesterday. But I mention the associates as 3 of them came with us, and I get the distinct impression that Thomas has combined this celebratory trip for our wedding with some kind of business. He tells me that we are coming here anyway and that my imagination has run away with myself again. I have still neglected to tell him that I am continuing to write in my journal. 29th of November, 1933. I don't care what Thomas has said. He has spent more time with this Marsh character than with me, his own wife. I would of course never say this in public conversation, but this Marsh is a fat prig who never speaks to me directly, and speaks of me as if I weren't there. Thomas does nothing at the time to defend me, but tells me afterwards that it is not worth the time to contend with Marsh and his overbearing mannerisms. I can see his point of view. My mother used to say that only a fight worth winning is worth fighting, and thankfully I've not had to spend much time with Marsh, as they leave to discuss business, leaving me to myself. I have seen little of Aylesbury, or the surrounding countryside. 4th of December 1933. I grow weary of this place, and I grow weary of the associates of Thomas. I have grown used to the ill will that Marsh seems to have towards me, but Olney is the opposite. The attention he has started to lavish on me, always touching my hair and hands. When he touches me, all I wish is to pull away. There is something about him, something utterly repugnant, not physically, but an aura of something that repels me that is unutterable. I am pleased when I am sent away, or they go to another part of the hotel. They seem to be planning a trip somewhere, a trip that requires another of their associates to arrive, someone they have not often seen. I grow resentful already of married life. Perhaps I have made a mistake. 9th of December 1933. Thomas, Olney and Marsh made plans for tonight. They are out even now. They spoke of meeting a gentleman called Joseph. The conversation carries well in the corridors. This Joseph has something they all need, and I believe I heard Thomas speak of Joseph coming back to England. They have been gone for nearly 2 hours now, and it is getting very late, nearly midnight now as I write these words, and I have no idea when they intend to return. I am pleased to hear words regarding the return to England. I shall not look back at this place with fond memories. I did see a place on the maps called Dunwich, and I must remember to ask Thomas what his connection is to this place, as the home we now share in London is Dunwich House. I fear, however, that he will say it is nothing but coincidence. 10th of December, 1933. Thomas and his 3 associates arrived back in Aylesbury in the early hours of the morning. I believe that Thomas thought me asleep. When I inquired about his evening, he merely dismissed it, telling me that the business is concluded here, and that we are returning to England tomorrow. I had no idea that we were so close to leaving. Am I feeling sad about it? Yes and no. But I thought I'd have more time to prepare to leave. Thomas left me for the rest of the day. He had something occupying him, and for the first time, Olney did not speak to me. Instead, he took something to Thomas. A bottle, I believe, of some kind. 4th of January, 1934. It has been a lonely Christmas and New Year. Thomas entertained several of his friends. It also turns out that this man, Joseph, did in fact come with us, but I do not remember him on the ship back to England. He joined us for the festive period, but keeps himself away from me. There are more of these bottles that Olney had in Aylesbury as well. The house is nice. What I had requested before the wedding has been met. I have a separate bedroom, which I thought to be somewhat unusual, and was not something I expected. The room is nice, but a little uncomfortable. It is on the top floor of the West Tower, and I spend most of my time there. 30th of January 1934. Last night, it was the strangest thing. It was late, about 3 a.m. according to the golden clock on my mantel. I heard a faint sound from downstairs. I followed it down to the hall. Across the way into the study there was a light of a fireplace coming through the door. I tiptoed to the door and listened. I heard Thomas speaking, but the language was unknown to me. I never even knew that he spoke anything other than English. But he was not alone. There were at least 2 others with him. I didn't recognize the voices, but I could guess who was with him. I asked the staff who was present last night, but they told me no one. I don't know if they are lying, or simply just put out of the way whilst this strange gathering went on. I was too fearful to stay long listening, so I left as quickly as I could, back to the safety of my room. 13th of February 1934. I've spent the last couple of weeks trying to look into Thomas's office, but he is relentless with keeping it locked, and the staff apparently don't have a spare key. Thomas has been away on business for several days as well, and it was not until I was writing this entry that I realized I have not left Dunwich House for about 4 weeks. When I realized, I was somewhat put out that my friend Mr. Harker has not called on me since the New Year. Perhaps I shall venture out to see him soon, maybe even tomorrow, as I am led to believe that Thomas won't be back for several more days. 14th of February 1934. The staff were not happy that I chose to leave the house today, but they could not stop me. I arrived at Mr. Harker's not long after lunch, and he obliged me with a bite to eat. He told me that he had been asked to keep away to let me settle in, and had honoured Thomas's request. It saddens me, but I can see the logic. At least I have the ring he made for me to remind me of his friendship. We agreed to write when we could. When I returned home, I longed for the room at the top of my tower, to sit on the bed and look out the window over the gardens and run my fingers across the flock wallpaper. It almost distracts me from my journal at times. 26th of February 1934. I paced my room last night. I hope no one heard or worried about where my thoughts were taking me. I'm sure I spoke aloud more than once against my own volition, as I did not want people to hear me as I talked about what I knew. In the darkness I could almost see them, among the shadows maybe. I must get into Thomas's study. I must see what they are doing. I'm never alone in the room. I looked out of the window in the early hours and I saw 3 people watching me as the sun rose. Then they were gone. I have heard the staff this morning talking about Thomas going on another work journey in 2 weeks' time. It will be my next chance to get into his study. 14th of March 1934. Thomas has spent the last couple of days with me, and it was like the days before we were married. A wonderful man. I told him that his companions were out in the gardens at sunrise, but he just laughed and stated that they would not do such a thing, because they were needed in the office in the mornings and could not be travelling around so much. He told me they were solicitors, and he was a junior partner. At last he has told me his work, and he has told me that he would be leaving soon for a client. This was the work trip I had overheard the staff discussing. I pride myself at how adept I've become at moving in such a manner to remain unseen and above all unheard. Thomas left this morning, and I am about to attempt to look into his study. 15th of March 1934. I did it. Today I got into Thomas's study. There was nothing untoward at first, but I was able to spend a lot of time there before the staff would start to be suspicious of my absence around the house. The books were varied and much of what I would have imagined, but it was the cabinets that were far more interesting. I found the bottles I had seen previously, but I know nothing more about them even after my examinations, for they were merely filled with some salt, with a strange odour. There were several books written in a strange, ill-looking language, but it was his notebook, written in a shorthand not known to me, but there were some words in English letters: Kamuk, Dunwich, Yog, and the most often written was Ibn Ghazi, over and over. I had to leave my snooping there for want of not arousing suspicion, and managed to sneak back to the safety of my room. But that word, Ibn Ghazi, I must look again when it is safe to leave the four walls of my room. I do miss Thomas despite these strange secrets. My mother always said the greatest burden is always on our hearts. 18th of March 1934. I thought about going back to Thomas's study today, but the staff were busying themselves around me. I suspect they knew I got in there, and I suspect that Thomas left expressed instructions to make sure I didn't go in again. So I remained mostly in my own room, the safe room. I don't even let staff in there anymore. I left a small table outside the door used for pots and plates and such. They seem happy enough with this arrangement, and I've got used to seeing the people in the garden at sunrise. In fact, yesterday they were not there. It seems I had risen too early, and I longed for their appearance. Then they walked among the trees and stood in their spots and looked up at me. I could not see their faces, but I know they are not Marsh, Olney, or Joseph, for two reasons. Firstly, I believe they will be with Thomas on his trip, and secondly, I get the sense they are not against me, but trying to help me in some way, perhaps giving me the courage of spirit to look for what the Ibn Ghazi means. I have not been able to get it out of my mind, and have written it many times myself in my journal, which I now ensure is hidden from all, and I only write in it at night, so that I know I will not be disturbed in my thoughts. 19th of March 1934. Thomas returned yesterday. I was not able to find anything else about this Ibn Ghazi, running it over in my mind. I think it is an object of some kind. Maybe Thomas and his associates are looking for this thing, but tonight they were all here, all four of them. I heard them again chanting. I heard some of their words. I recognized them from the notebook. They chanted Kamog over and over until it became little more than a constant drone. I believe I fell asleep to the drone, staring at the walls of my room. I woke up a few minutes ago. It is still dark, but the sun will be coming up soon, I am sure, and I must see them in the garden. 2nd of April 1934. I spent the evening with Olney. It was pure chance, really, but he is a fascinating character. He told me of his time in America, looking for various artifacts. He told me this is what he did for the office. I was surprised to hear of solicitors doing this kind of work. I tried to carefully press if he was attempting to find this Ibn Ghazi, but did not. It felt dangerous to even skirt around it. But I know now they are planning another trip where they intend to find something important. Could it be this Ibn Ghazi? All I know on this is that they are once again going next month. There is something else I am fearful to write, but it may not be avoidable much longer.
The Dunwich House Mystery was made for the Darkest Page podcast. Maria Carter was played by Zaya B. The Dunwich House Mystery was produced by Benny Dogman and written and directed by the host.